We're joined by Elliotte Friedman from NHL Hockey on Rogers. You can text us at 630-630. Ryan Rishaug reporting today from TSN, Elliotte,
I'm sorry, I'm unfamiliar with that network.
Preliminary discussions on the Patrick Maroon. What makes sense for you on a 3 or 4 year term for Patrick Maroon?
Well, I think, what's he making now?
He's making $2 million. And Anaheim is paying $500,000 of that, which is just beautiful.
I remember they took some of the salary.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you're Pat Maroon, you're probably looking to, it's your biggest chance to get a big number. I'm sure you'd like to at least double it. I think I have no doubt that they are going to look at everything they can do to make this work. Reading Ryan's story today, that read to me like there's a player here and there's an agent here and there's a team here that like the fit. And whenever you have two sides that like the fit, as far as I'm concerned, you're already halfway there at least. Because now what you're doing is you're saying, how can we make this work? And I'm sure the Oilers have said to him, Pat, we can make it work, but there's a limit to what we can do here. And you're looking at a guy who's bounced around. He's been in how many organizations? You're looking at a guy who nearly lost his NHL dream because, there were concerns about whether or not he was committed enough to do it. I think you're looking at a guy who's clearly happy with his situation. I mean, I think in that kind of way, will he go to them and he say, can you give me a couple extra years and I'll keep the AAV down? I don't necessarily think you're looking at $46 million like TJ Oshie did.
Right.
But TJ Oshie, for example, is a guy who said, I'll take less money if you give me term. And I think there's a lot of guys, and I don't necessarily know if that means 7 years, $23 million or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to look at something like that, where maybe the player gets an extra year or two in order to keep the number down. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like that.
Well, the other thing, you talk about connections. Alain Waugh is the agent for Patrick Maroon. He represents Mark Letestu. He represents Chris Russell. He represents Keegan Lowe. He is a former Harvard grad, played at Harvard right after Peter Chiarelli. He is a very agreeable guy. There are certain agents, and we're going to talk about one of them in a second, who seem to have. What was the joke about Kurt Overhart for all those years? Kurt overcharge, right?
Yeah.
And conversely, you have an agent like Alain Waugh or like Jerry Johansson out of Edmonton, and those guys are seen as deal makers. Those guys are seen by organizations as, they're reasonable. They'll lie a bit about their guy. The team will lie a bit about their perspective, but there's a way to get to the middle ground, and there is never super contentious negotiations. So I just look at the connection there, Alain Waugh, to me, it's and the other thing is, I think Patrick Maroon realizes, we got the Vancouver Canucks coming into town. Remember when Anson Carter didn't re-sign with the Canucks after playing with the Sedins, right? And I think if you're Patrick Maroon, you're going, I almost had my career ended with the Philadelphia organization before I even got to Anaheim. This is the right fit. Let's make it count here, right? That's kind of how I see it.
I think there's a lot of that, and I think if you read the quotes today, that's everything is there. That's exactly what's going on. He's happy. The one thing is, I don't blame guys. Anson Carter also set himself up for life, right?
Yes.
I don't blame guys who say, this is my one best chance to take care of my family, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it. You never know what a guy's situation is. But you have a choice in this particular case. Do you want to go where you fit and you're happy, or do you want to go chase the biggest dollars? And Anson Carter, in that situation, he went and he chased the biggest dollars, and he set his family up for life. As I've become a father and I've become a parent, I understand that decision. But I also look at a guy like Pat Maroon, like Bob McCowan, the radio guy here in Toronto, all you guys know out there. His best advice he ever gave me was, don't bleep with happy. and it's not a word I can say that because I don't want you to get in trouble, Bob.
Right.
And he told me that he's met a lot of people that jump for an extra $5,000 or $10,000, and obviously we're not talking about that when it comes to the NHL, but I think those are numbers that an average person can really understand. You know, an extra $5,000 or $10,000 to go somewhere else, and they're like, "Oh, damn it, I shouldn't have done that. I went to a worse situation." I think Pat Maroon's in column B. He's saying, you know what, I'm going to make a lot of money regardless one way or the other. I'm going to be in a good position, so I'm prepared to sacrifice a bit because I'm going to be happy. And I just think when you're in that frame of mind and the team is willing to be reasonable in ways that can help you out, then, you know, I think, look, I look at it this way. If the Oilers are willing to put some extra term there in order to keep the number down, and I'm not privy to their discussions, but if that's what they're willing to consider doing, then I don't see how this is going to be a big problem.
We're joined by Elliotte Friedman. Elliotte, we do allow one guest to use that word, George LaRocque, who's going to argue with him. That word that Bob McCown says you're not supposed to screw.
Shogri had the story about Patrick Maroon and the negotiations seem to be well underway. We had the question, what do you think would be ideal term fair for both sides in length and cap hit annually?
Oh, length and cap hit annually. Well, I mean, I think the Oilers would probably be happy at, I don't know, $13.5 million over 3, say?
4.5?
Sorry, I did the math wrong. Hang on a second. You made me do quick math there.
3.5 is 10. Okay.
10.5. Yeah, sorry. Oh, boy, I hope the morning show isn't listening. Oh, that's funny.
Well, Fraser's probably still in bed, so no worries there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all rattled here because I'm like one hand away from completing a back-to-back sweep over Randine in our afternoon crib match up here. So like we were trying to get the last hand in before radio started. So I've just had numbers running through my brain for the last 25 minutes.
Do you have like a crib card beside you to count your hand?
Yeah. No, I just hand it to her and she counts it for me. She moves the pegs too.
Yeah, nice. That's
I just shuffle the cards. Anyway, no, I mean, I think the Oilers would love it if it were under $4 million, but I don't know how. I mean, if you're Patrick Maroon's camp, you're also looking at it going, okay, you found a nice compliment to Connor McDavid, and there's value there in finding someone who can play and complement your superstar player. He's 27 goals. If he continues on that pace this year and were to put up another 27 or 30 goals, then he'll probably push the number up even more. So, yeah, I think there's got to be a balance. I think normally in these situations, if you're willing to give a guy a little bit of term, then maybe the number will come down, and that might be the case with Maroon. But then, you're giving him term, and where do you feel his game is going over the next 3 or 4 years? I mean, I'm sure Maroon would want four years or more, but how do you feel if you're Peter Chiarelli about having him locked up to that long a deal? So, negotiations have started. Both sides are interested. Both sides, it sounds like it's cordial, and there's interest on both sides. But whittling this thing down to a number that works might be a little bit difficult because Peter Chiarelli's got a lot to consider over the next couple of seasons.
Oh, for sure. When the big contract kicks in next year, and their defense, Benning and Nurse are going to need new contracts. Mark Letestu, I would think, is going to need a new deal. Now, Letestu is an interesting one for me. You look at his age, and I think he'll want to be here. I think the organization will want him to be here. And I don't see him, even though obviously he had a great year last year, I don't know if I see him having a big raise due to age. I think if he could keep the same cap hit number, maybe slightly up, that he'd be very comfortable staying in Edmonton.
Well, and you have to be careful, though, right? Because so now if you do that, and I like Mark Letestu, too. I just did a big thing on him yesterday about all of the assets that he has. But so then what's Cassian's number on the cap? So you got Cassian at $2 million plus, isn't he? I can't remember. I don't have my computer on, so take a look when you can. But then you'll have Letestu, who's 1.8, I think, right now.
Yeah.
So if you give him a raise, now he's over 2. Then you got Cassian.
No, but when I said raise, I meant like 1.9, like just a.
Okay, well, whatever.
Sure.
But even so now you've got, can you have a $6.5–7 million fourth line, which between Cassie and Letestu both pushing those numbers up.
Well, that would be
high.
4, and then you got Jujhar Khaira, who's like 6, so it'd be like 4.7 between the three of them.
Yeah, so you need to be careful about the fourth line is where you want to have some of your value players, right? You don't necessarily want to be paying two guys upwards of $2 million a season on your fourth line. So I think he just needs to be careful about what he's putting where. Because you get Darnell Nurse, who's going to be doing Benning, and Ryan Strome, and who knows what that number is going to look like. And if Strome clicks extremely well with McDavid, well, maybe you can't necessarily afford to have both Strome and Maroon at the same time if you've got other guys to get done. So that's why it's very tricky. It's not just about, do they like Patrick Maroon? Does Patrick Maroon like Edmonton? Yes, they do. Here's a number, and bang, you're off and running. There's a lot of other jigsaw puzzle pieces that need to be figured out and put in place. Like Darnell Nurse is an interesting one, right? I mean, what's the situation with Darnell Nurse and a possible extension for him? I mean, is it guaranteed that they're just going to have to bridge him?
Well, you know what? It's interesting you bring that up, Ryan, because I've looked a lot at defensemen, and historically, D-men being bridged for 2 years, much more prevalent than we see amongst forwards. And I wouldn't be surprised that both Benning and Nurse are 2-year deals.
Okay, so, and fair enough, that might be the case. But there's also risk in bridging guys, right? There's organizational risk in bridging guys. So, I mean, let's say Oscar Klefbom was due a new contract after next season, or after this season, because all they gave him before was a 2-year bridge, right? What would that number look like if Klefbom was up at the end of this season and suddenly he was top, power play point producer on the blue line and scoring a bunch of goals and having a real solid, becoming a top pairing defenseman? Now, what does that next deal look like for him? So because Peter Chiarelli gambled on Oscar Klefbom before he fully knew what he had, he got term and a good dollar out of him. Felt like it might be a little much at the time, but look at that deal now. So they're at a very pivotal point with Darnell Nurse too, where what it would cost to do him long term probably would feel a little bit too high, but where do you think the defenseman's going in the next 2 years? So sure, bridge Darnell Nurse. What's that deal look like in 3 years when you gotta hit him again?
Yeah, no, it's true. I think the one difference there with Klefbom now, like there's only so much ice time and opportunities to put up big numbers, right? When you have that. So if the Klefbom's there and he's on your number one power play unit, and even Darnell Nurse is moving along, is he going to be that good to suddenly dispatch Klefbom out of that power play unit to put up the big numbers to get a big ticket?
Well, I mean, I don't think Darnell Nurse is in danger of pushing 50 points at the NHL level. I don't think that he's overtake anybody offensively necessarily, but I mean, you've seen the guy play, man, and you've seen the way he is growing and developing, and if he can get a few things in his game sorted out, he still has the potential to be pretty dominant. And I'm talking big, strong, powerful, shut down, can move the puck. I mean, he could be a force of nature still, and that's worth a lot. So you kind of got to guess a little bit and go, okay, sure, well, you bridge Darnell Nurse to keep the numbers down for the next 2 years while you're in this window, and that's all well and good, but you risk that he really, really breaks out and really goes, and then you end up costing yourself a lot down the road. So that's where the art of projection comes in, right? You can't get too many of these wrong. You got to get them right. And I mean, it's a good problem for the Oilers to have, right? I mean, they've got too many guys who look like they are second pairing defensemen, and too many guys kind of in that 3, 4, 5 spot. And that's a good problem to have. It means they've got depth finally in true NHL defensemen.
Yeah, no, I think the reality is for the Oilers, like when you look at the teams that win, they're probably going to get to keep 7 or 8, 9 maybe of what you deem like core guys, right?
Yep.
And then other guys are going to be moving parts in and out. And it's going to be unique because over the last few years, the conversations were always like, oh, they got to get this guy in to help him and everything because they were terrible. But as you get better, the reality is they're going to have to lose some players just because of the cap, even though they don't want to. And that sometimes maybe might be even more difficult because you pick the wrong one or you lose the wrong one. You just hope you have enough depth. And it'll definitely be a big change, I think, the next 4 or 5 years moving forward, maybe even sooner than that, for the Oilers and their fan base to get used to having to say goodbye to good players because the math just simply won't work for all of them.
Well, and this is where you see the drafting and developing become more crucial because now you've got a group of scouts you got a hockey operations staff that are drafting in the 19 to 30 range. And what you're trying to do is stock your, like, you're trying to still find players that can play so that you can, fill them into some of those important spots and not have to overpay free agents and stuff. So now you need to go and find guys. Like, make no mistake, Tyler Yamamoto, that draft pick is hugely important for the Oilers, because if Tyler Yamamoto is ready whenever, next season or the season after, and is ready to step in on an entry-level contract, but put up top six type offensive minutes or step in and contribute right away, well, now all of a sudden maybe you're not spending $4.5 million on whoever, Strome, Maroon on the other side. So now you're drafting and developing to plug players into some of these key spots, and it's absolutely crucial. I mean, Tyler Yamamoto is a really important player for the Oilers, because if he can step in and play in the next couple seasons, just like if Jesse Puljujarvi can step in and play sooner rather than later, those are value contracts, skilled players in important spots.